So I'll just get started, Minister. Thank you so much. I would like to start by looking at this trip that took place over the last 24 hours. We saw 3 European leaders going to Kyiv, and actually the Ukrainian president has said that more leaders, more officials should go to Ukraine and express their support. Is this something that you're planning on doing as well?
Yes, over the last few days we have seen additional visits to Ukraine, and it is definitely strong support for Ukrainian people, Ukrainian government, and of course the president, and I definitely support it and try to figure it out how to go to Ukraine and visit Kyiv, because let me recall also that on the 24th of February, when the war started, I was in Kyiv because we planned to have a joint visit together with our Baltic colleagues to Ukraine and visit also the contact line, but we had to cut off our visit to the unjustified war, which started the same morning.
And in this trip that you're planning on taking to Ukraine, what do you want to do? What is the aim of being in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, of course, we would like to hear from our Ukrainian colleagues how exactly the international community can help Ukraine to continue its fight for the territorial integrity of its country and also for democratic values, and also show our support to Ukrainian people.
Is it safe for you to go?
It is, of course, not safe because of this ongoing, very unfortunate war in Ukraine. But I hope that it would be also a sign for the Russian Federation to stop this unjustified and unprovoked war in Ukraine and start to withdraw its troops from Ukraine.
Now, within this context, we saw the Prime Minister of Poland making a statement saying that if Europe loses Ukraine, then the EU, and I quote here, will be a pathetic version of itself. Do you agree with his assessment?
It is, of course, it would really very difficult to imagine that Ukraine loses this war, because it would be a big change in the international order, but of course also for Ukrainian people, because then they would not have home where to return. And so I truly hope that Ukrainian will win this war. They win back their country for their people.
But even if this war was to end in the near term, some territories are now occupied by Russian troops. So Ukraine is unlikely to be the same that we knew before this war. Can the EU as a political bloc actually survive and continue after this aggression and after this war in Ukraine?
I agree with this, that the world is not the same anymore, and this is very unfortunate because we see so many wounds around us because of this war, and at the same time I would say that the sooner it ends, the better for the whole Europe, for the whole world. And from the European side, we of course continue to support Ukraine and also continue to give political pressure towards Russian Federation to end this war and to withdraw its troops from Ukraine, because from our side, of course, we continue to support Ukrainian territorial integrity and its sovereignty.
Do you think that President Putin actually cares about the sanctions that the EU has put forward?
It is very much it's very difficult to understand what he really thinks of the issues, because he has started the war with thousands of civilian casualties. More than 3 million people have left Ukraine so far because of this war. And all these activities show that there is no rationale behind of these military actions. At the same time, what we see that Russia's economy is affected by the economic sanctions posed by the EU, together with the United States and the United Kingdom and other like-minded countries. It clearly shows that it has effect, and it also shows that Russia has, in the near future, Russia has less money for its for this war.
But despite all of that, Putin has not stopped. This war is still taking place. So ultimately, this is not impacting him, and these sanctions are actually not hurting Putin.
This is very unfortunate, really, that this war is not stopped yet, and it clearly also shows that international agreements and security architecture is not enough to avoid another war here in Europe or also around the world. So there are many things we have to think so that in the future we would not see this kind of wars anymore.
So just to follow up on that, do you think that NATO perhaps needs to be redesigned?
I would say that NATO is a part of the European security architecture, and NATO is really to protect its own members and also democratic values in the transatlantic era. But when we talk about for example, about the OSCE or United Nations, we see that these organizations are enabling any further actions that would help to end this conflict.
Something that NATO has said recently as well is that the institution is monitoring any signs of China potentially helping Russia in the war in Ukraine. Are you worried that China might go down that path?
I truly hope that China is responsible a member of the United Nations Security Council and would join other countries to condemn this aggression started by Russia. Let me also recall that at the United Nations more than 141 countries agreed that this aggression in Ukraine was started by Russia and condemned these activities, also invited for protection of civilians in Ukraine. So there are majority of the countries around the world totally understand this, and of course I hope that other countries will join and condemn this activity and actions by Russia.
What would happen if China actually helps Russia in this war? Would that be a reason for NATO to actually intervene?
So far, we have seen that Belarus has helped Russia in this war, and from the European Union side, we have also therefore posed sanctions against Belarus because they are part of the conflict. And of course, if other countries continue to support Russia's unjustified war in Ukraine, then we have to consider this kind of actions.
So just to clarify what you're saying, if China were to help Russia in this war, then the Western countries should also impose sanctions on China?
Yes, we should discuss it, definitely.
And do you think that if China were indeed to get involved, could this lead to a third world war?
This is too much speculations already, I think, but I truly hope that China will not take these steps to support Russia directly in this war against Ukraine.
Describe to me, how do you see this new security order? One of your colleagues, for instance, I was speaking with the Prime Minister of Latvia, I also spoke with the Minister of Lithuania, and they seem to think that there is a new Iron Curtain over Europe. Is that an assessment that you agree with?
At the moment, yes, we see that this kind of Iron Curtain is a new reality for us. And of course, it depends very much which kind of government is leading Russia, because if there is autocratic government, then there is need for one type of security guarantees. For other countries, if there is different government, the reality is different. But of course, current agreements have not been enough to avoid another war in Europe.
I would like to get your thoughts as well on a potential NATO permanent presence in Estonia. I believe this is something that's being discussed. We, of course, have that big NATO summit in June. Could you just outline what sort of support would you like from NATO going forward?
In Estonia, we have enhanced forward presence mission of NATO at the moment, and the United Kingdom is a leading country here. We really appreciate the support of NATO allies, especially of the United Kingdom, France, and Denmark. All these countries have increased its presence here, and we would like to see that this increase of NATO troops here in Estonia would have permanent solution. And of course, we must continue to assess the current security environment of Europe and provide NATO means how to respond to these new challenges. And we would like to see that here in Estonia or around the whole eastern flank, we would like to see air defense in present. Also, we would like to see forward defense instead of forward presence. So there are conceptual changes in the NATO's defense posture that we would like to see.
And of course, the President of the United States is going to be in Europe next week. Do you think that as the conversations that you will have and your colleagues will have with the United States President to indeed discuss more NATO presence here in Estonia?
Yes, and from our perspective, it would be very important to have more US troops also in Europe and also here in Estonia. And we very much welcome the recent decisions by the United States to be more present in Europe with its troops and defense means.
And finally, what sort of hopes do you have for these meetings that will take place next week in Brussels with the United States, both at the NATO and EU level? What do you want to see?
We would like to see the decisions with regard to how to strengthen the defense and deterrence posture of NATO. And also, of course, we would like to see close cooperation between the European Union and NATO, how to cooperate together so that the transatlantic area and our region is better secured and protected.